Man Up in Harlem is a by men for men ministry that focuses on creating positive changes in the Harlem community through prayer and community service. The group hosts a men's empowerment hour every Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the Polo Grounds Housing Community Room, and a weekly prayer walk every Thursday morning in several locations. At the prayer walk, members pray together in a football-style huddle about community issues. Man Up in Harlem's slogan is "Don't talk about it, be about it." If you'd like to join a prayer walk, meet at 6 a.m. at the 155th subway station for the Polo Grounds House Walk, or at the Dunkin' Donuts at 126 in Amsterdam for the Grand House Walk. For more information, please check out www.manupharlem.org.
And guys, we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on WHCR 90.3 FM. I am really excited about talking about this topic. First, I want to give you guys a little background. Last night, I saw the movie Django. I'm sure everybody's heard about it, even if you haven't seen it. So Django Unchained is played by Jamie Foxx. He is a slave turned bounty hunter trying to free his wife, played by Kerry Washington, from the evil clutches of a brutal plantation owner, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and it takes place in Mississippi for the most part. The movie is set about 2 years before the Civil War, and it has been called violent and historically inactive, but also a fantastic movie and such a well-written satire. So there's definitely major differences in what people believe of this, and it seems that it's almost like you either love it or hate it. Very few people have a middle ground. Just if you didn't know, Django Unchained has been nominated for 4 NAACP Image Awards, including Best Pictures. My first thoughts upon seeing the trailer, it was like, okay, this is a Tarantino film. Quentin Tarantino is a director. He's in Kill Bill. He did Inglourious Basterds. He is known for these kind of very graphic movies. So I immediately was like, I'm not interested in watching it because it's usually very violent. It's just a cartoonish, blood splattered. So it's not really my idea of entertainment, but it is for some people, and some people consider him a genius in this kind of art. Then it wasn't until later on that I started reading about, well, maybe it just doesn't portray slavery in the right way. Why is it satire? Why would we even do this? That's just offensive in many ways. And I said, okay, well, maybe there's more to it. And Selena pushed me.
Yes, I did.
Then tripped her.
She pushed me so much that I was like, I wanted to talk about it, and I did go to see it. Like I said, even though I'm not a fan. So it was very difficult for me because it's like, okay, what do? I need to forget that I don't like this director. I need to forget that I don't want to enjoy this kind of films and really see it for what it was. And you're right, Selena, I did have a different interpretation of it. Maybe not the one you were expecting I would have, but it's definitely different.
I'm just glad you saw it.
And, and it brought me to this and how we wanted to discuss Hollywood and what kind of movies Hollywood plays. What kind of movies does Hollywood like to play when it comes to Black people, when it comes to slavery, and it comes to our history, and why do they always kind of choose this one narrative as opposed to maybe one that is based on reality, as we have seen with many other films, especially films relating to like the Holocaust, which is why maybe it doesn't alarm me so much to see a Holocaust satire, because there are many serious movies, and I think that that's one of the major issues that people have about this movie. So we have on the line Sarah J. Jackson. She's one of my favorite people ever.
Mine too now.
Yes, she is. I kind of have a girl crush on her. I don't know if she knew that, but she's there on the line. Sarah Jackson, she is the Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and she teaches and researches about public narratives of race, gender, and political protests. Hi, Sarah. You're on the line?
Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm flattered that you have a girl crush on me. That's awesome.
It is. It's almost like a girl brain crush. You're just so intelligent. You're beautiful. All of the above.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet.
No, and listen, when we were looking for a guest, I mean, you were like the first person that I was like, if we're going to talk about this, I want her. And I told Selena as my co-host, and I was like, this is who I want. And she's like, okay, let me do some research. And then she comes back like, oh, I love her.
Yes. I'm a fan, and it only took a day.
Really?
Awesome,
one day
awesome.
and following.
Well, thank you, ladies.
And guys, once again, we're here on Let Your Voice Be Heard. We're talking to Sarah Jackson of Northeastern University. We're going to dissect the movie Django Unchained, and we're going to talk about how Hollywood portrays Black people, slavery, and our history. If you have any questions, any comments, please call us up. The number is 212-650-6903. So I want to start with this. I follow you on Twitter, so I definitely know that you were very apprehensive about going to watch Django. I remember
Yes.
she was tweeting while in the line to the movie theater and was like, oh my God, I'm so apprehensive. And so I just want to get, your follow-up on that. How did you feel after you watched the film? Was it better? Was it worse than you expected? Like, what did you get after it?
Yeah, I was extremely apprehensive to see it, and we can talk more about that later in terms of, like, what the expectations are of the images that Hollywood gives us about slavery, and especially because it was a Tarantino film and there was, like, humor and, like, cartoonish stuff in it. I was very, very concerned. And as somebody who studies media as my profession, it also gave me a lot of anxiety to think about, like, how the audience was going to perceive what they got from the film and whether they were going to take it as being accurate or whether they were going to be, like, laughing at things that weren't appropriate to be laughing at. So I was super nervous about seeing the movie. After I saw it, I actually walked out of the theater and went, well, that actually wasn't as bad as I was expecting. It wasn't the most comfortable film to watch, as anyone who's seen it can attest. But in terms of some of the things I was worried about, I was relieved on some ends. And then, of course, there were definitely things that I have very strong critiques about that were problematic about the movie. But there were also things about the movie that I liked. So I ended up kind of being in that middle ground between, like you said, people either love it or they hate it. And I feel like I kind of am in the middle, like,
It's meh. No, I definitely had a very similar reaction. I went last night. It was a very small theater. There were maybe 10 people there, and everybody was white, actually. I was the only person of color. Well, me and my fiance, we were the only person of color in there. And to my surprise, nobody ever laughed at many things. I mean, some people chuckled. I mean, I was almost a little bit bored. The movie was kind of just very Tarantino-esque. So I was just like, all right, whatever. I know there's going to be, as soon as that bullet hits that guy's head, it's going to explode. Like, LOL. It's just like what it is. So I try to detach myself from that. But in terms of the movie, and a lot of people are saying, including Spike Lee, that it's completely inappropriate for this white director to be making almost a satire of slavery. But I feel that, we never see a movie in which the slaveholders are portrayed as, like, inhumane and just overly disgusting. Usually they're like, oh, maybe they're kind of sympathetic to the struggle. And then the slaves are usually portrayed as just being so meek and so petrified of their owners. And this one turned the tables around and gave us this powerful black man who has taken vengeance. I mean, could that be seen as something positive, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, you're right. What is significant about this film is that it turns what has been the traditional representation of slavery in Hollywood on its head, because traditionally you had movies like Gone with the Wind and Song of the South where it made it seem like the pre-Civil War South was this beautiful place with these super civilized white people, and that the slaves were happy to serve them and that they liked their lives and it wasn't all that bad, and they sang songs, And so, of course, this movie absolutely turns that on the head and makes, the hero is a slave, and the person who's being saved is a woman of color who is also a slave, and the villains in the film are the white slave owners, and the white slave owners are very much shown to be, uncivilized and uneducated, and they're absolutely shown in a negative light. And so in that way, it absolutely is, I guess you could say in a way, progress on what the sort of more traditional stereotypical representations of the pre-Civil War South were. But at the same time, there's also still some problems in the movie in that, like, yes, there are parts of the movie that are just wildly historically inaccurate. And, of course, Quentin Tarantino is not attempting to make a documentary film about slavery, and so a lot of people have said, well, what if it is historically accurate? Does that really matter? But there was definitely some scenes in the movie that bothered me in terms of how historically inaccurate they were. And there was also Quentin Tarantino's movie, again, always has some things around gender and the way he represents women in the film that really bothered me, but that's true for pretty much all of his films. And so, there's some things specific to, like, how we would critique Quentin Tarantino as a filmmaker, and then what we could praise about the film in terms of it offering a different type of hero for us.
And Dr. Jackson.
Oh, you're nervous, Selena?
A little bit. So And I agree with you because there were certain scenes where the women were kind of sexed up. You have these black women who kind of seemed like they were enjoying their lives.
Yeah.
They were definitely sexualized. But I actually wanted to point to another aspect that I really appreciated with the film, something that Tarantino, I think, turned on its head again. And that was he drew a clear line between the distinction between good and evil in slavery. Now, I remember being taught that in school that some slave owners took care of their slaves, that they were more empathetic and sympathetic towards them, and, you know, they loved them. And I think in the movie what it did, especially in the last scene, what is it said that there's no fine line. It's either you're for this evil or you're fighting against it. And the last scene in particular is where he really exemplified this notion. And that's where he killed the white lady who was a slave owner, but she was very sensitive to her slaves. And he also killed the black Uncle Tom character. Stephen. And I think that he killed both of these characters to say that even though they weren't the people that were treating slaves harshly, they were a part of the problem. And anyone's a part of the problem if they perpetuate apathy or passive aggression. And so I thank Tarantino for doing that. And for anyone who sees it, because I know that especially in a lot of schools, you're being taught that slavery was not that bad. I distinctly remember a teacher of mine using that quote.
Wow. I mean, that's shocking that you were taught that in school, because, of course, that is wildly inappropriate to teach anyone and not the case, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think, and you know, it's the thing that's really interesting about movies or media in general is that everybody who watches this movie is going to get something different out of it depending on their life experience and their background and their politics and what their expectations are. And so it's interesting that you say, you know, you took that scene at the end where, you know, he killed the people who weren't just the actual owner of the plantation, but were even, like, associated with the plantation as sort of this denunciation of those people who were enabling this institution, which is really interesting because, you know, I've also heard critiques where people are like, but how come at the end the last two people he kills isn't the slave owner? You know, Django's character, I don't know if we're giving away spoilers here, but we sort of already have.
That's all right.
Django's character, you know, doesn't actually get to kill the Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who is the person who, you know, owns his wife and is running this horrible plantation. So it's kind of interesting because although he does have this triumphant moment at the end, there's also some things around like, well, why is it that the last person he kills is Samuel L. Jackson's character, who you sort of have described as the Uncle Tom character? And does that feed into stereotypes about, like, the idea that maybe there were slaves who were, like, happy and content to serve and things like that? So, you know, it sort of really is up for interpretation on how we as individuals interpret those scenes in the film.
I'm going to jump into the conversation now.
Yeah, go ahead, Stanley.
Yeah. I think people are overly insensitive, and I think people, just my opinion, obviously.
Insensitive or overly sensitive?
Overly sensitive. Thank you, Patty. Columbia education right there. They're overly sensitive, and they're lying to themselves in regards to some of the things that happened during that time period. The people, there were slaves who were very happy in their lifestyles, who were very just comfortable in the bosom of the slave master. As you can tell, the characters like Stephen existed. Those were real. The interpretation of black slaves in that time period, that was real. It was considered okay to rape a black woman because they thought they were naturally lustful because of their big butts. Those things happen, and people are taking offense to this.
I think you're talking about two different things. It's absolutely true that at that time period, it was seen as okay to treat black women as property. They were treated as animals, and they were raped in mass. I think the problem that we are discussing is how in the film and in films in general, like when those women are shown as loving their lives and not being upset about the fact that they're being raped in mass regularly, that's the problem, right?
But
because
some of them did.
Facilitates and justifies the idea that that was okay.
I don't think so. I think it just shows that there were people who did like it. I mean, that's not saying all black women or all black slaves love their lifestyles, but that did exist. That's that color battle between black people, dark-skinned people, and light-skinned people, field slaves and house slaves. That came from somewhere. And maybe the movie wasn't like historically factual, but certain aspects like that was spot on. And that kind of mindset, that belief, when he kicked everyone out the room and he said, "Not you, baby," to the black woman there, and she goes, "I know you wouldn't talk about me," even though he told all the black people to leave. That's a mentality that still exists on a different realm today. It's real. We can't ignore it. Don't be offended by it because, you know, you don't like it. It is what it is.
Right, but I think the distinction we're making is whatever the dynamics within the African American community are today, they are absolutely rooted in slavery, but what we have to keep in mind is that in slavery, nobody was autonomous. Nobody had control over where they were or what they did or who did what to their bodies or what they believed. And so you're right to say that there were some people who, were house slaves and there were some people who were field slaves. And the institution of slavery and the white people who owned them created a system in which there was sometimes antagonism between those groups. But that was a matter of survival. That was a matter of, I have to allow my body to be abused or raped or whatever, or else I'm going to have something worse happen to me. Or I have to work in the house and serve with a smile on my face and be vicious to other slaves, or else I'm going to have my children sold away from me. So it wasn't that black people were like, I'm going to choose to hate other black people. I'm going to choose to be a house slave, and I'm going to choose to. It was that none of these people had autonomy because of the system. And so as much as you're right that, of course there were house slaves, like what we would call Stephen's character in Uncle Tom, right, who served and did so with a smile on their face, the idea that we could say today, this many hundreds of years later, that they were actually happy to do that ignores the fact that they had no control over doing that. They had to do what was best for them, for the circumstances, to survive. And if that was put a smile on their face to survive, then there were people who did that, right? But I think it's a different thing than saying, there was an actual natural pecking order, because no black people at that time had the power to create that order. They were simply cogs put into that by the system.
Right. No, and thank you for saying that. We were talking actually when you were saying, and Stanley was like, oh no, but they were, and I definitely understand that. I mean, I'm assuming that as especially maybe a woman that was much lighter, much slimmer, much more beautiful would have been a house slave, but that was something that was chosen for her, and I think that that's what you're trying to say, that maybe yes, it was a better life than a slave that was out in the fields working and whatever, but it was still a life that they didn't get to choose, and it was chosen for them. But yeah, Selena had actually a comment that you wanted to say.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Really quickly, just to add on to that, I feel like the institution of slavery, what it also did, slaves, they were forced to emotionally detach themselves from the torment and the torture. And I feel like Sam Jackson's character, he played the Uncle Tom, he did that brilliantly by detaching himself. And it wasn't like, if Stanley's saying some people made the choice, it was because this evil, this torment, this torture of either being physically harm yourself or watching your loved ones go through it, as a coping mechanism, and I think Sarah touched on this, what they did was they emotionally identified with their slave owners to the point where Sam Jackson's character became an extension of his slave owner, and that was only because he couldn't deal with the torment. That's it.
Right, and I think we also have to recognize that, the character, Sam Jackson's character, is a representation, is a stereotype that has existed in media for generations, right? Ever since the book Uncle Tom's Cabin was written, and there has been this trope of the slave who helps run the plantation and loves his master and actually loves his master more than he loves other slaves. And what we also have to recognize, rather than just saying well, that was really true, what we have to recognize is that the constant reproduction in film and in media and in other narratives of that particular slave image makes it seem like, right, that the people solely responsible for slavery weren't the white slave owners, but that somehow there were also black people who were responsible for this institution. And that's simply not true, because, again, whether there were house slaves or not, whether they, were helpful to their owners and smiled about it or not, they had no choice in the matter, right? They weren't holding up the institution of slavery. They weren't enslaving other people. They were simply doing what they had to do to survive in whatever circumstances they were in.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, oftentimes that particular character that Sam Jackson plays reproduces this image of where people can go, see, black people did horrible things to each other too. See, it wasn't just white people. But that completely takes away what the realities of the system were around who had power to control what was happening.
Exactly. And, let me just throw the number. Guys, we're talking to Sarah Jackson from Northeastern University. Well, that was hard to say. And this is Let Your Voice Be Heard. If you guys have any questions for us, please, the number is 212-650-6903. And Sarah, I wanted to go when you were talking about this, the Stephen character, this Uncle Tom. And I went to see the film with my fiance. He was born and raised in Egypt in a village that was very remote, and he definitely doesn't have an understanding of slavery or American slavery as perhaps we do, whether it be limited or not, because I also went to school in New York City, and I definitely recall teachers telling me, like, well, did you know that black people sold other black people? And it was almost, it made me feel at the end like, thank you for that factual maybe information, but it made me feel like my experience as a woman of color was diminished somehow, as opposed to be uplifting. And I think that's what you were trying to talk about with this character. Like, yes, perhaps they did exist, but what is it doing for us as a narrative? And, you know, talking about my fiance, I'm going back. When we got home, he actually really, really loved the movie. For him, it was just a Tarantino film, and he didn't really think too much about the history. But he said, I don't understand that Steven guy. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't get it. He's like, you know, I know that the movie was supposed to be kind of comical, but it doesn't make any sense that this man loves his master so much when you can still see that he kind of treated him like, you know, second, like, I'll take your advice, but get the heck out of my way. You know, he says, I don't really understand. And I think that a lot of people maybe feel that way. So, like, what do you say to that? Does this do any harm for people watching it? Because I think that, like I said, my fiance left thinking, hey, these guys really did love their lives.
Right. Well, I mean, and I think it depends on how the people watching the film interpret it. If they interpret Steven's character and put that into a larger narrative that somehow justifies and says, like, oh, look, there were black people who didn't have it that bad during slavery who loved it, then that's a problem, because that's simply not true, right? Nobody loves being owned. Nobody loves having their family and their culture ripped away from them. Nobody loves that, right? Nobody did ever. People did what they had to do to survive under certain circumstances, and sometimes that was perform a certain type of thing that wasn't necessarily how they felt, right? But I think a lot of people that I've talked to about Steven's character also said that they read Steven's character as being more of like a cartoonish, like kind of making fun of like an Uncle Ruckus character from the Boondocks, where that character was actually making fun of the stereotype of the Uncle Tom, because there's such a common narrative about like the Uncle Tom who loves his master and da-da-da-da-da, that I know some people watched the film and they said, I actually thought that Sam Jackson played that character so stereotypically and so much like Uncle Ruckus and Boondocks that they were actually making fun of the idea that there could be, you know, this Uncle Tom who loved his master so much and was so evil to other slaves, because it was just so cartoonish and over the top.
Right.
And so I think it sort of depends on how you interpret it, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, I think so. That's one of the problem. Like, for me, I definitely have a very large understanding of the reality of life at that point. So I'm like, I can separate. I can say, I know that that's for comedic effect, and I know that really happened, and I know that didn't. And I just feel that not many people would feel the same way. But Sarah, we have to take a short break. And when we get back, we have to close up soon. But I want you to stay on the line so that when we come back, you can tell us, you know, where we can read more about what you do. So can you hold on for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Guys, this is Let Your Voice Be Heard on WHCR 90.3 FM. We'll be right back.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on WHCR 90.3 FM. Thank you for that song, Stanley. I love MIA, and I love that song. And I've been asking him all week, can you please play that song for me?
Yes,
So
I've been
thank
asking him
you.
all year.
Thank you for that. I don't know. I like the beat, and I don't even know. I think I was watching a movie, and they had it in the background, and I remembered. But moving along, we have Sarah Jackson on the line. Sarah, I know that I told you that we were going to close soon, but we are going to continue this discussion, and I just wanted you to tell us, closing thoughts about you can definitely be honest about what do you feel, what is Django doing for the representation of slavery? Should people go see it? Is it not worth their time? And then let us know where we can read more about what you think.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I think like I said earlier, Django is good in that we're having this conversation. I think if anything, this is the best thing that's come out of it is that I've had so many conversations since even I found out the movie was being made. People are talking about it on the radio. People are talking about it on the news about whether or not, the film industry in Hollywood is doing a good job of representing slavery, and people talking about whether a white filmmaker like Quentin Tarantino, who's going to bring this sort of over-the-top cartoonish violence, is the appropriate person to be doing this. And I think having the discussion is what makes the film the most valuable. The fact that we're all sitting around sort of debating and disagreeing and talking about our interpretations, because what that does is that forces us kind of as a country and as a culture to have a conversation about slavery in the media and how the media represents slavery. And that's not something that we talk about very often. And so for me, I am glad the movie was made simply because of the conversations that have been made as a result. In terms of, do I think people should go see it or not go see it, I honestly am indifferent. I don't think that it's, I personally don't think that it's an amazing movie.
Right.
But I also think that there are things about it that are fulfilling. It's fulfilling to see a slave be the hero for once, right?
Yeah.
It's fulfilling to see a slave get vengeance and blow up a plantation. It's fulfilling to see those things for many people. And so, I think if that's what people want to see, they should absolutely go see it. But
right.
keeping in mind that, it's not a historically accurate film. It's not a documentary. It's not like a serious drama. It's not, Schindler's List, but with slavery, right? It's a Quentin Tarantino movie with, people flying across the screen and lots of gore and violence and, silly jokes occasionally. But,
right.
At the same time, it absolutely was not, I didn't find it particularly offensive either. And so I really think it's up to people what their expectations are about whether they want to see the movie.
Hey, Sarah, I didn't, not to cut you off, but I just want to give the number out there, guys. We're talking to Sarah Jackson about the movie Django Unchained. And if you have any questions or comments, the number is 212-650-6903, or you can tweet at us at BeHeard_radio. And Sarah, we actually have a caller on the line who has a question for you. We have Dr. Stefan Omar. Dr. Omar, are you there?
Yes, hello. How are you? And good afternoon to the lovely ladies and to your panel.
Thank you.
I want to discuss this movie, if I might. I'm a grandfather. My grandson and I saw the movie together. My son watched the movie also. And it's caused quite a firestorm in our community, especially with intellectuals like Cornel West and Ishmael Reed's, and we know Spike Lee's comments and what's been said on the Internet. But I'm going to look at it at a different point of view. I looked at it as being a love story. I looked at it as being a man who was married, and back in 1858, that was almost unheard of for black slaves to be married, and a man who wanted his queen, who wanted his black queen, and would go through hell and high water to get her. Okay, and we know QT, and we know the type of work he does. There's always a lot of violence. There's always a lot of N-word, F-word, this word, that word. But once again, I looked at it as being a love story, a proud black man who just refused to wear chains, who wanted so much to have his wife, who was willing to pay $12,000, which was almost unheard of. That's worth about maybe $20,000 today, just to be with his $20,000, probably about $500,000 today, because they were on the gold standard.
You're a very smart guy, Dr. Omar. He's like, I'm converting that money for you guys.
Yeah, and then on top of that, we know that. First of all, we know characters like him did exist back then.
Yeah.
They just weren't showcased. We know it's a movie. We know it's not a documentary. It's not factual. We know all of that. But I wanted the young people. I remember when I went to the theater, how many young people got up and cheered at the end. My daughter, and I'm part of the civil rights struggle, and I told my daughter, Trinity, I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't want to see it. It's very painful. She says, Dad, you have to go see this. She saw it in North Carolina. She said it was on Christmas Day. Most of the audience, 99.9% of them were white. She said very few black people, because a lot of brothers, well, I said, well, brothers and sisters spend Christmas with their families. They're not going to go to no movie, you know. And like I said, it's caused quite a storm. But the only thing that I find, this Stephen character, we know people like him. We all know. We have neighbors like him. Our politicians mainly are like him.
Right. Thank you. You know, and Dr. Omar, I really appreciate that he mentioned that, and that he said that it was a love story. When the movie finished, and you know, she's waiting in her horse for him, and they kiss, and they ride off into the sunset. I think, wait, this was a love story all along? I mean, because the whole thing is like, I'm trying so hard to find this like narrative of slavery and slave owners, and then it ended up being like a sappy love story. So, you know, I'm glad that he did bring it up. And
you know what? This is actually a Western, right? This is framed like a Western. Quentin Tarantino just said it during slavery. But if you go into it and say this is a Western about the cowboy rescuing the damsel in distress, that's exactly what the movie is, right? So, like, if you read it that way, then it's totally an enjoyable story because it is about the lone cowboy going to any lengths to rescue the damsel in distress. And you know, I appreciate hearing from, you know, a voice from the civil rights movement. I appreciate Dr. Omar's comments, and he's right about the fact that we never in media or hardly ever hear the stories of there were countless slaves who fought actively against slavery, right? And there were slave uprisings, and there were all sorts of, you know, organized efforts among slaves to, whether it was actually run away or whether it was poison their owners, right? The house slaves were actively trying to poison their owners and things like that. That was constantly going on, and we rarely hear these stories. And so it is nice that we got a story where we saw somebody fighting for his freedom and fighting. And, you know, I liked Kerry Washington's character, even though she had a small role in the film, because it wasn't just that she was the damsel in distress. We find out in the movie that even though she's been separated from her husband, which it would have been illegal for slaves to be married at the time, and even though she's been separated from her husband and sold, we find out when we're first introduced to her character that she's still actively trying to run away. So she's still always being punished because she's still actively trying to run away. And so we see the two main slave characters in the film do have agency and are fighting against this.
Right. And exactly. And I think that in some ways you can say that, hey, maybe it is empowering if you really forget about the historical accuracy and just see it as like, hey, this is a great love story, and it is black people struggling and doing something to survive. And, you know, Sarah, we have to end this segment. We have another caller on the line, and she's going to say some comments. You can definitely listen in, but we have to kind of close it up. So after our caller finishes with her statement, we are wrapping this up. But thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all your commentary.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. And anyone who's interested can follow me on Twitter at SJJPhD.
Thank you so much. You have a great one. Jackie from Queens is on the line. Jackie, are you there? Hi, Jackie. Go ahead. I know you had a comment about this movie. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a big reason why I was so excited to see it was because I was really into Inglourious Basterds. And for me, Inglourious Basterds, you know, I'm Jewish, and so that movie was kind of, you know, it was interesting for me to see kind of how Quentin Tarantino would portray what happened during the Holocaust and how Jews responded. And I love that movie. It was so, you know, it was so over the top and not historically accurate at all, but it kind of gave some, I don't know, it was kind of something that I think a lot of Jewish people might think about, you know, kind of getting revenge on something so horrible that happened to us and kind of seeing history unfold in a different way. And so I think that's something really important to remember with this film as well, is that it's not historically accurate. You know, Quentin Tarantino makes all of his movies so over the top, but it's just kind of, I don't know, an interesting way, maybe entertaining way to see kind of how, a different way, how, you know, it probably couldn't have happened that way, but a different perspective. So.
So sorry. Thank you for that statement, Jackie. And I think that it's very important. Like I said, we compare movies. And with that, I almost want to, this is why I think that Django Unchained seems problematic. When it comes to the history of the Holocaust, like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of movies that are really, really in-depth and really serious, and you can really see the pain and the suffering that it caused to Jewish people and to anybody during this time period. Hollywood, though, has done a very poor job at telling stories about slavery, at telling stories that are realistic about slavery. So then when you have this movie that it takes creative license with the history, then you feel like, really, like the one time that we have a movie about our history, it becomes almost comical. So I'm really, really glad for that. Ooh, you got people online. Go ahead. Okay, Stanley wanted to talk for a while, Selena. So Stanley, short statement, and then Selena can answer.
I actually have a question. What about it was historically incorrect?
About the
KKK. The KKK wasn't around until 2 years after. So 1961.
They came after the Civil War, actually, because they were like the ghosts of the Confederate soldiers, I think it was.
Yeah, and I think there's also the portrayal, like there's in the scene he goes and he wants to kill the three brothers, and he's walking, and then there's like black women like in swings.
Oh yes, definitely.
It's just a little bit it just takes a lot more liberty into portraying what a woman at that time would have been doing in a field.
That wasn't necessarily incorrect.
What do you mean not necessarily? That's what we're trying to say, that not all women or men at that time would have been working like their butts off in the field, but to portray this like almost exaggerated. There was actually a whole lot of beautiful women with beautiful décolletage being shown in the movie, and that's, like I said, Sarah Jackson said it. That's Quentin Tarantino. He loves to show this, and it's almost just like kind of like an over-sexualizing of things as opposed to showing the reality.
But that's really the black women were over-sexualized in that time period. That was factual as well. And they still like are. Slaves. Slaves. Yes, they had work, but it could have been a Sunday. We never established the day they were there. And on Sundays, you did have time to go to church and worship, and there was some downtime. Not a lot.
Sounds like a
fun
time.
I'm not trying to say there's vacation time at all in slavery, but there was time where you could. That's something like that where you saw the person in the thing could have happened. My frustration is that I don't think, people are saying it wasn't historically correct. What about it? Like those things, okay, that's fine. But I think the bigger issue is people are frustrated with some things that they don't like about slavery, about the history of it.
I think we've established that it's so much more than that, yeah.
It's why? I mean, it's real. It's real. It's ugly, but it's real. And what's the problem with that?
I didn't think the movie was actually that gruesome.
It wasn't
showing slavery as gruesome as I thought it was.
And it wasn't that historically incorrect either. It isn't like it tried to establish like, oh, this is when this happened, or this is when that happened. It wasn't the case at all. So I don't understand why people say that.
At one point, Quentin Tarantino did say that his movie is more accurate than even Roots, and I think a lot of people felt like, seriously, man,
well,
like you're already making exactly, which is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
That it's so much more than just this movie is inaccurate. It's more about like the way it was presented to us. But Selena, you have a comment.
In my closing remarks, I just want to say that Mandingo fighting, that definitely did happen during slavery, but I think that the movie kind of played it up a little more and exaggerated it, because think about it, slave owners, would they buy these slaves, they spend a lot of money on them, would they risk beating them down?
Yes, that was 130%
no,
true.
It was true, but I'm saying that to that level.
Yes.
Well,
it was worse.
that is a movie. That is a whole thing, and this is what I keep coming back. It's the whole thing. Whether it happened exactly as Stanley says it did, like this is so accurate, exactly the way he's showing it. No, I'm just trying to say where you're saying like, I don't care if it's not perfect the way you wanted to see it, but it exists, whatever, or it didn't, as you're trying to say. The thing is that it is a movie, so characters are going to be exaggerated to the max because people pay to go see almost stereotypes of people. So if there's a white guy that is kind of bad, he's going to be horribly bad. If there's a black man that's going to be kind of hero, he's going to be the extreme hero. And I think that we have to also remember, like I said, it's a movie, which is why you almost have to exaggerate your characters so that people can empathize with them, because real life actually is kind of boring. But I say it, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to close with this. Django Unchained is not going to be a documentary. If you look at it, it's going to be for entertainment purposes. And I think that what really, really bothers me the most is not that the movie was created. It's not that the movie is about slavery. It's not the way they portrays black people. It's just that we really, really need to do a better job at showing these movies in reality, or as a documentary with its seriousness, so that people can actually say like, yeah, I know the reality of it. This is just a movie, and they can enjoy it. Not have the one film where we can be like, well, it is what it is. Let's just do it. And if I want to learn more, I'm going to just have to do my own research. And that's all I actually ask of Hollywood, which, you know what, it's going to take a lot of us, people of color, black people, to become directors, to become artists, and to really push for our stories to be told. If we don't do it, nobody's going to do it for us.
And to support them with our dollars. Most importantly, there's a lot of black filmmakers that historically portray slavery, but we need to go support it.
Yeah.
And and believe me, if a director presented this movie and he was black, I don't think that he would have got the funding to make
and it's
Django Unchained.
Yeah, so that's almost a thing.
We need to support it.
So, closing statement, fund people of color so we can have our stories be told in any which way we want. If you wanted to make a comedy, go for it. You want to make a drama, go for it. But guys, I took way more time than I should have, even though it was a really, really great discussion. We're going to really take a short break, and we're going to come back with Stanley and the Quickie.
All you people look at me like I'm a little girl. Well, did you ever think it'd be okay for me to step into this world? Always saying, little girl, don't step into the club. Well, I'm just trying to find out why, 'cause dancing's what I love. Yeah. Get it, get it, get it, get it. Get it, get it, get it. I know I may come off white, may come off shy, but I feel like talking, feel like dancing when I see this guy. What's practical, what's logical, what the hell, who cares? All I know is I'm so happy when you're dancing there. I'm a slave for you. I cannot hold it, I cannot control it. I'm a slave for you. I won't deny it, I'm not trying to hide it. Baby, don't you wanna dance up on me to another time and place? Oh baby, don't you wanna dance up on me? Are you ready? Leave behind my name, my name. Let's go. Like that. You like that? Yeah. Now watch me. Get it, get it, get it, get it. Get it, get it, get it, get it. I really wanna dance tonight with you.
I can't like Nicki Minaj.
And we are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. And we strive to be your voice every single Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Thank you so much for listening. We just had an amazing conversation about Django Unchained and the way that African Americans and people of color in general are portrayed in Hollywood. And it's a conversation that will never end. It has to end right now for us on air, though. But make sure you tweet us at BeHeard_radio or Facebook us, and we can talk over there. So I'm talking so quickly because we're doing a quickie, and I'm good at quickies. You want to keep up?
Geez.
Great. So
I'm done.
I love Stanley. I love him.
I'll be
Typical
trying. I'll be
guy,
trying.
you're
Yes,
done?
that's right. Listen, girl, it's a race. All right, I tell you
Typical
every
man.
week. You catch up.
I ain't
All
finna
right.
go on.
This is a sprint, baby.
This is so romantic.
Listen, didn't I kiss you in the mouth first?
This is so on Django.
Yes, the what? Anyways, we're doing a quickie, and I am talking about the AIG. Guys, let's go back in time. Let's hop in the DeLorean and go back to 2008, September 22nd, I think it was, and Lehman Brothers had went bankrupt. At this point, we were pretty much on the edge of having an entire economic meltdown. The government was losing over 800,000 jobs a month. People were filing for unemployment. People were losing their jobs, and you couldn't get any credit because everything was going to crap. At that time, there were some very huge businesses and banks that were going to go bankrupt. And because of this, the Secretary of Treasury and the U.S. government decided to bail out a few of these companies. Huge bailouts. These bailouts were done with our tax dollars, in case you guys didn't know. One of the companies that we bailed out was AIG at the tune of $182 billion. And now, you know, it's 2013.
You should be the lottery guy. $1 billion.
I try. Now, 2013, you know, for the most part, like, these banks have recovered. The ones that didn't are done. Good for you. Sorry. Too bad. Goodbye. And the economy is slowly recovering, even though, you know, depending on who you talk to, they won't agree with that. And now, some of these same people that we bailed out back in 2008.
What are they doing now?
They want to sue us.
Oh, come on.
Yes, they want to sue us, guys. So, anyways, I'm going to pretty much explain to you what is going on. So, one of the banks I was considering jumping on this lawsuit was a bank by the name of AIG. So, it was one of the banks that was bailed out, like I said, for $182 billion. And out of all the banks that were bailed out, it needed the most money because it had gotten to the biggest mess. Okay? And now these banks that are suing the government, including AIG, who was considering it, they're saying that the government singled them out of all the other banks and made them pay the most. Because what happened was when the government bailed out these banks, they took partial ownership in some of them. AIG, at one point, they owned 92% of the bank. And they were very upset about that. So what's going on now is that Maurice Greenberg, who was a former CEO of AIG Bank, he resigned in 2005 because he had some kind of shaky accounting practices going on.
They all do.
Still
Typical
owns,
banker.
I'm not going to judge bankers, but he's a slime ball.
No, they are.
But
Typical.
he still owned a nice stake in AIG, and he has a company called I'm butchering it, but it is
What's the
called
name?
Star Labs. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, computer. So Star Labs. And he filed a lawsuit for $25 billion, pretty much saying that the government treated them unfairly and they singled them out. So to explain this a little bit easier, imagine this. Selena,
Are the
Danielle,
banks black? Is that why they were singled out and treated differently?
I don't know. Maybe. AIG colors are in black. Who knows? But Selena, Patricia, and Kwanzaa all have,
Hair.
Or they all have hair, but you guys,
this isn't a game.
you guys
No.
live in a house with one parent. So say Karina is your parent, and Karina says you can go outside, but you have to be in by 2 a.m. Selena, Patricia, and Danielle all come in the house at 5 a.m. So now you're all in trouble. But like while going outside, you got arrested, you got in trouble, and the parents had to come and bail you out. Selena and Patricia got arrested, for like being drunk, and parents are mad, so they say you're grounded for a month. Danielle snuck out the house, stole the car, got arrested, wrecked the car, and then borrowed money from someone and didn't pay them back. So along with having to bail her out of prison, they got to get a new car, they got to pay this person back, and she has to go back to court. So because of that, they say she's grounded for 7 months, and now she's saying that's totally unfair. How come I'm getting a worse punishment than everyone else? That's pretty much what Maurice Greenberg is saying about the government bailout for AIG.
Well,
So-
I'm just glad that my prostitution, jailing me, they didn't show up on my record, and that's why,
Yes.
Because it happened that night, I remember.
Exactly. So that pretty much explains basically why, he feels like, he's suing the U.S. government. Maurice now approached AIG because he wanted them to get into this lawsuit, because if AIG got into the lawsuit, they can prolong the lawsuit, which would help to encourage the U.S. government to settle the bill. AIG considered it, but as of Wednesday afternoon, they decided not to do it, especially since they had a campaign thanking America for all of our money we gave them. All right? So now Maurice Greenberg is doing this on his own. He's trying to sue for $25 billion. And here are some of his claims. He claims that the 80% stake that the government had in AIG was done unfairly because there were not enough stocks available that were being sold publicly when the government took over. So pretty much, the government, they first gave AIG $85 billion for 82% of the stocks. Greenberg is saying that's not fair because 82% of the stocks weren't available for anyone to buy. If you're confused, imagine it like this. I have a sandwich, a full hero sandwich, and I say, I'm going to let you guys get some of the sandwich, but you can only have a half of the sandwich. If you want more of that sandwich, I had to sit back with Danielle and Kwanzaa and decide whether we want to make that other half available. Greenberg is saying the U.S. government said, nah, forget that, and went and took the half I made available, then took the other half without, even though I said no, and threw me back some crust and said, here, take that and pay me this interest rate so you can get back your whole sandwich, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what he's saying the U.S. government did. And of course, he has these problems with that because he says because of that, because of them taking away so much of the company when they weren't allowed to, the shareholders lost billions of dollars that he wants to get back.
So it's all for the shareholders then. This is all about the shareholders making sure that they make a profit.
The old shareholders,
The
yeah.
old shareholders.
Yes. So he's
Well,
suing,
rich people don't like the money to be taken away. That's all I got to say.
You would know, Patricia.
Oh, right.
So pretty much he's contending that because the shareholders were cheated out of billions of dollars in profits, and in turn he wants to sue the government for $25 billion. And in short, he's saying the U.S. government violated the Fifth Amendment, which says that the government cannot take any property from a private institution and distribute it for public use without proper compensation. So he's saying they pretty much bogarted them, and he say it's not fair. And he said there were other ways that they bailed out these companies, but they didn't take a stake in the companies, and that the U.S. government should have done that. That is pretty much the entire lawsuit. From what I see and what I know, there are no other banks involved in this lawsuit. AIG was in the news this week because they were considering getting into the lawsuit, but by Tuesday, when Washington heard about this, they were ready to chop some heads off. They were ticked off. AIG
Done.
backed out. Greenberg is still filing this lawsuit. He filed it in 2011. It's going to go to court, and we'll see what happens from there. But, guys, a couple things you should remember. AIG was the biggest one. It needed the biggest bailout. $182 billion of tax money that is not all completely paid off yet. America still owns 72% of AIG. AIG, as soon as they got that bailout, you know what they did? They took their top administrators out on this nice retreat that cost about $486,000, and then they invested about another $1.2 billion in promotions and bonuses.
That's what bothers me the most. Rich people trying to get richer.
Exactly. AIG is not in the clear with this, and Greenberg is not in the clear with this either. And the reason that we took such a big stick was because if AIG was in such a mess, they had so... Pardon me, coughing over here. But I'll put it this way. Selena has a whole bunch of cell phones, right? And she says, I'm going to sell you 1 million cell phones, okay? And you give me $10 for these, and I'll make sure the cell phones are on all the time. But it's going to cost Selena $100 a month to pay for these cell phones. She doesn't have any cell phones. So now, all of a sudden, you got 1 million people asking for their cell phones. Selena doesn't have it. So now Karina has to come in and buy all these cell phones to give it to these people. So she had to front the money. And when you do something like that, you need collateral. Guess what the collateral was in this exchange?
Taxpayer money.
And no, the ownership of AIG.
Oh,
They're
the
mad about
ownership
the
of
collateral. So that what was going on with AIG. It's super complicated. I'm going to post up the legal brief online so you guys can take a look at it. It's a really funny thing. We're going to see how this thing goes in court. I don't think that Greenberg is going to win, but it's something to think about because if we can get a bailout, it'd be great, but we can't. We go to bankruptcy. And if AIG would have went to bankruptcy court, they would have been in an even bigger mess. Wow. So that
Great
was a
job
quickie
breaking
this
it down,
week, guys.
Stanley.
No, that was.
A lot to read, lots of legal briefs last night. I hope you guys got something out of it because we are getting out of here. But once again, thank you so much for listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard. We are here every Sunday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. for you. Educate, inform, empower. You are the voice of the future. Your actions are the voice of the future. Be a dreamer and doer. Everyone has an opportunity. And we are going to get out of here, not with a slave for you because that's kind of weird. We played that already. But with another song, and I will see you guys next week.
Bye.
So I ball so hard, niggas wanna find me. But first, you gotta find me. What's 50 grand to a motherfucker like me? Can you please remind me? Ball so hard, the crack.